Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So today is an emotional day in the world of boxing, and I promised when this day came, I would make a career review for David Price. That's right, David Price today has announced his retirement from the sport of boxing. It is official. He retires at 38 years old with a record of 25 wins, 7 defeats, 20 of those 25 wins coming by way of knockout, and all 7 of his defeats coming by way of stoppage. For better or worse, David Price has been one of the most entertaining fighters in British boxing in the last 10-15 years or so. His career, from start to finish, has been pure entertainment, sometimes car crash TV, it has to be said, but extremely memorable. And yeah, we're going to basically take a trip down memory lane and enjoy David Price's highlights, etc. So, David Price, he's a born and bred Scouser, born in Liverpool of course, proud Scouser, and in his mid-teens or so, he decided to take up boxing, and he realised he actually had some talent. He had a knack for boxing. He went through the domestic scene in the amateur circuit, and eventually he started travelling abroad over Europe and all over the world to fight internationally in amateur tournaments. And David Price, he was never one of these standout amateurs in the world, but he was respectable. He was a decent fighter at amateur level, and you know, the highlight of that amateur career was actually winning a bronze medal in the 2008 Beijing Games. That was in the super heavyweight division, and he eventually got stopped by Roberto Camarelle, and this marked the end of David Price's amateur career. That was the highlight of it, a bronze medal in Beijing. Nothing to be ashamed of, quite a good achievement. After the Beijing Olympic Games, David Price decided to turn pro, and when he turned pro, there was a level of excitement, there was a level of expectation surrounding David Price. When he turned pro, he was basically viewed as the best heavyweight prospect in the UK. And funnily enough, in the early fights, when David Price turned pro, he actually turned pro with Haymaker Promotions, which of course was run by David Hay. He made his pro debut in Liverpool, and he fought journeyman David Ingleby. And David Price won this fight no problem whatsoever. He won by a 3rd round TKO. And, you know, David Price's early fights, he was feasting on journeyman, as you can see. And, you know, he won these fights no problem whatsoever. There was no real scares in these fights. He did what he had to do. And, you know, he was developing into a prospect in the heavyweight division. Soon after his pro debut, though, he actually left Haymaker Promotions, and he then signed with Frank Maloney, or then Frank Maloney. I'm not sure exactly when that was, but it was quite early in his pro career he signed with Frank Maloney. And, you know, Frank Maloney, of course, worked with Lennox Lewis back in the day, and he viewed David Price as his next Lennox Lewis. He thought David Price was the guy to overtake the Klitschko's and basically rebuild his promotional company after, you know. If David Price was the goods, then I guess Frank Maloney thought his promotional company would be back in the big time, but obviously that never happened. Nevertheless, David Price's first real test was against Osborne Mcdermott, and this was actually a Commonwealth title eliminator, and I believe this fight was on Sky Sports. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but he won this fight comfortably. He won it by a 3rd round TKO, and never really had any problems in this fight. After the Mcdermott fight, he then fought Rafael Butler, a well-known journeyman at the time. Once again, David Price won the fight by a 1st round knockout. No real problems. He then fought a fellow unbeaten prospect at the time, Tom Dallas. Now, there was a bit of excitement for this fight. It was viewed as David Price's toughest fight of his career, just because Tom Dallas was undefeated and he himself was viewed as a bit of a prospect, but David Price won this fight decisively, and he knocked out Tom Dallas in the 2nd round. Good performance. Tom Dallas really got blew away. After the Tom Dallas fight, he then fought John Mcdermott, who was a well-known guy in the domestic scene at the time. In fact, this was a John Mcdermott who wasn't too far removed from giving Tyson Fury a life and death fight. Most people felt he beat Tyson Fury in their first fight. So John Mcdermott at the time was a solid domestic contender in the heavyweight division, and this fight was for the English heavyweight title and also a British title eliminator. And once again, David Price blew away John Mcdermott and won the fight in great fashion. And it was around this time, around the 2012 time, late 2011, 2012, around this time period, there was so much hype for David Price. When he turned pro, there was a bit of hype, but like this time period right here, 2012, 2011, late 2011, there was so much hype for David Price. It wasn't to the level of when Anthony Joshua turned pro, but the hype was real. And at this time, there was a lot of talk about Tyson Fury versus David Price. That was the hottest ticket in British heavyweight boxing, and it was one of the biggest fights in the UK at the time, but it never happened. And funnily enough, there's a lot of revisionist history when it comes to David Price, but at the time, David Price was viewed as the better prospect, and he was viewed as the favourite if these guys were to ever square off around that time period. And yeah, there was a lot of back and forth between both guys. Obviously, Tyson Fury had that famous speech where he referred to David Price as a plumber. And yeah, at this time, man, everybody was desperate for a David Price-Tyson Fury fight, but it never happened. Nevertheless, after the McDermott fight, David Price then fought for the vacant Commonwealth and British heavyweight title against Sam Sexton, another kind of decent domestic contender at the time. And Sam Sexton actually managed to take David Price 4 rounds, but ultimately didn't really have any success, and he eventually got knocked out, which crowned David Price the British and Commonwealth heavyweight champion. Price then had a title defense of his Commonwealth and British title against Audley Harrison. At this point in time, you know, this fight kind of got maligned and criticised. This was Audley Harrison well past his best, you know, being knocked out numerous times, and people really didn't see the need for it, but it happened, and David Price scored a brutal knockout on Audley Harrison, knocked him out in the first round, and fucked him up basically. After Audley Harrison, David Price fought Matt Skelton, another domestic contender at the time. Matt Skelton actually is from my neck of the woods. I've met him a couple of times, and he's actually a really nice guy, Matt Skelton. But David Price, he blew away Matt Skelton, but this was the first time in David Price's pro career where the vulnerabilities were on display. Now, he won this fight, and he won it comfortably, but Matt Skelton found it far too easy to get on the inside against David Price, and when he did, I personally felt David Price looked really uncomfortable, and it was around this time when I thought to myself, this guy isn't the goods. He's not the goods. And, you know, he won the fight, the hype was still crazy, but I wasn't convinced at this point in time. After the Matt Skelton fight, David Price then fought Tony Thompson. Now, in retrospect, this was a massive step up for David Price. Tony Thompson actually gave Vladimir Klitschko a hard fight in their first fight. Tony Thompson had competed at world level and made a good account of himself, right? So this was a huge step up for David Price. And at the time, I actually placed a bet on Tony Thompson to win this fight. I'm not sure exactly what the odds were, but he was wide. He was wide, and people at the time just didn't give Tony Thompson the time of day. They expected David Price just to walk through this guy and demolish him, but that never happened. David Price suffers the first defeat of his career. He gets caught with a right hand kind of behind his ear, and David Price's equilibrium completely goes. He beats the count, he gets up, but he's doing like the Bambi legs. Like it was like a giraffe got fucking downed like 10 pints of Stella, you know? Crazy. Second round knockout for Tony Thompson, and the hype of David Price at this point in time was derailed. Having said that, he then took a rematch with Tony Thompson, and at the time people kind of were questioning whether this was the right decision, but many people were still picking David Price to avenge his defeat and win the rematch. However, again, that wasn't the case. David Price actually dropped Tony Thompson in this fight in the second round, and he started quite well, but Tony Thompson, he stuck around, and eventually started to find the target. He started to grind down David Price. David Price's gas tank basically depleted, and he was done. You know, Tony Thompson landed a series of unanswered punches to a point where David Price turned his back. The referee stopped the fight, and this was the second defeat of David Price's career. And obviously after this fight, it coined the famous speech by Tony Thompson where he said that his wife would need a hip replacement once he gets back to the hotel room. And funnily enough as well, after the second Tony Thompson defeat, David Price's manager at the time, Frank Maloney, would then come out as a transsexual, and he would change his name to Kelly Maloney. So these defeats, man, to Tony Thompson really caused reality to shift. You know, crazy circumstances. They were a crazy couple of fights, but I remember them fondly. I really do. However, after the two Tony Thompson defeats, David Price then attempted a comeback. He actually signed with Sauerland, I believe, at this time, and he fought abroad on various occasions. He fought Ivan Rosinski, where he won by a first-round knockout. He fought Andre Parler, who was a well-known journeyman at the time. I think David Price got dropped in this fight. I'm not sure whether my memory is correct, but I'm pretty certain David Price got dropped in this fight. But he came back and won the fight by a third-round KO. He then fought the tough journeyman Zavarotny and went 10 rounds, 10 good rounds, and he won the fight clearly. After that, he fought a Brazilian journeyman by the name of Costa Jr., and this marked David Price getting a shot at the European heavyweight title against then unbeaten Erkan Tepe. Erkan Tepe was coming into this fight, and he, like I say, he was unbeaten. He scored brutal knockouts over Michael Sprott and Martin Rogan, I believe. But going into this fight, people actually gave David Price a chance. Erkan Tepe was a favourite, but people viewed it as a competitive fight. I picked Erkan Tepe to win this fight by knockout, and that's exactly what happened. And it happened as early as the second round. Ultimately, the pressure of Erkan Tepe was just too much. David Price in that ring looked extremely nervous, and in the second round, he was caught by a monster left hook, which sent David Price crashing down into the corner, and he couldn't beat the count. And the commentary on this fight, in my opinion, was hilarious. When David Price gets caught, I think it was Jim Rawling on Box Nation just says, "Dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear." And that really summed it up. You know, a devastating knockout against Erkan Tepe, and this was the worst knockout of David Price's career so far. Nevertheless, he tried to rebuild again. He fought on a Matchroom undercard. This was the Tony Bellew undercard, when Tony Bellew fought Ilunga Makabu. He beat Vasiljev Pishar, won by a second-round knockout. He then fought in Germany, second-round knockout. And then he fought on the Chris Eubank Jr. versus, I want to say, I forgot the dude's name. But this fight here was on ITV Box Office, and it was on a Chris Eubank Jr. undercard. Oh yeah, Chris Eubank Jr. versus Reynold Quinlan, that's what it was. That was the main event, but he fought Christian Hammer on this card, and at the time I was saying this was the best fight on the card. I picked Christian Hammer to win this fight. So many people though were picking David Price, and this fight actually was really fun to watch. David Price started the fight well. He was boxing well behind his jab. I believe he actually dropped Christian Hammer as well. Yeah, he dropped him in round 5. But soon after this, once Christian Hammer got through round 5, David Price's gas tank really started to deplete. When Christian Hammer got up, I think that dented David Price's confidence. But Christian Hammer beat the count. He saw out round 5. And after round 5, Christian Hammer was applying the pressure. And like second by second, you could literally see David Price's gas tank depleting. and eventually, sorry, Christian Hammer got on top of him, started to land a series of unanswered punches, and once again, similar to the Tony Thompson second fight, David Price was turning his back, turning away from the action, and the referee stopped it, and David Price got stopped in the 7th round. But it was a really good fight. Pricey then fought well-known journeyman Kamil Sakalowski. I think this fight was on like IFL TV at the time, and yeah, this fight, although it was scored 60-54, which basically means Price won all of the rounds, it was a lot closer than that. Kamil Sakalowski definitely gave David Price some real problems in this fight. But after the Sakalowski fight, he then fought against Alexander Povetkin. At the time, this fight actually got a lot of criticism. People were concerned for David Price's health going into this fight. I think this was on the undercard of Anthony Joshua versus Joseph Parker, I want to say. And yeah, weirdly though, Pricey in this fight started well. He didn't look scared, he didn't look nervous, he was boxing behind the jab. He was actually catching Povetkin with some pretty good shit. But Pricey went down in the 3rd round, I believe, with an overhand right from Povetkin. Price wasn't hurt, it was a mistake, he crossed his feet, but he got dropped. But at the end of round 3, Price responds with a left hand. He kind of walks Povetkin into a left hook, a short left hook. It rocks Povetkin back. Povetkin falls into the corner, and the referee gives Povetkin a standing count, essentially. The referee felt that the corner kept up Povetkin. So David Price hurt Povetkin badly in the 3rd round, and he was in this fight, you know, arguably at a high level. This was David Price's best performance. So he was giving Povetkin a competitive fight. But in round 5, man, one of the most savage, brutal knockouts you will see. It was like something out of Mortal Kombat. Povetkin lands like I think it was either a right hand first or a left hook. I forget which. I'm pretty sure it was an overhand right first, which caught Pricey bang on the chin. Pricey was completely out on his feet, and then Povetkin leapt in with a left hook, bang on the chin, and it brutally knocked out David Price, man. Once again, fell into his own corner, blood dripping from the nose. One of the most savage heavyweight knockouts you'll see. Really, really brutal knockout. Really, really brutal knockout. And, yeah, savage from Povetkin. But one thing I will say, despite Povetkin cleaning him out, Pricey actually done well in this fight. You know, he gave it his all. He had success. He hurt Povetkin. And, you know, like I said, man, to me this was Price's best performance at the elite level. Take a quick swig of Stella Artois. After the Povetkin fight, Pricey then fought another Russian. He fought Sergey Kuzmin, who was a prospect at the time, a good amateur, Sergey Kuzmin. And again, weirdly, this fight, David Price was actually boxing quite well. He got caught a few times, but Kuzmin never really hurt him. Price was boxing on the back foot behind the jab, and he was being competitive. He was doing okay. But in the 4th round, he retired in his corner with a torn bicep, you know. Sometimes I wonder whether that was real, to be honest. I kind of think David Price just quit. I think he felt to himself, well, I can't hurt this guy. I've not knocked him out. Eventually, I'm going to gas, and he's going to knock me out. That's what I believe happened in that fight, because potentially a torn bicep is quite a serious injury. But only, as you can see, only 3 months later, he then fought Tom Little, and he won that fight by a 4th round stoppage. At the time, this was actually quite a controversial stoppage. I felt the fight could have been let to continue, but it was what it was. Another one of the most famous moments of David Price's career was when he fought Cash Ali. Cash Ali, of course, going into this fight unbeaten from the Rotherham area, I believe, or Barnsley, somewhere like that. He was unbeaten going into this fight, but he never really beat anybody of consequence. This was a big step up for Cash Ali. Cash Ali was a bit competitive to begin with at the start of a fight, but he was getting outboxed. He was getting caught by big shots, and eventually he started to get hurt. And in the 5th round, man, Cash Ali bit David Price up close in the clinch, which he got a point deduction for, I believe. And after that, at the end of the round, I believe, he bit David Price again on the chest, which left a visible mark, like, you know, Cash Ali was getting hungry, and Cash Ali got disqualified. Another crazy moment in the career of David Price. After the Cash Ali fight, he then fought Dave Allen, and at the time, I'm pretty sure Dave Allen was the favourite going into this fight. People had completely written off Price at this point. The theory was Dave Allen is going to take some punishment to begin with, but eventually Price is going to gas, and Allen's going to knock him out. But that is not what happened. David Price, man, one of the best boxing displays in his career, completely schooled and outboxed Dave Allen. He was pinging Dave Allen's head back with the jab, landing counter right hands. There was times in this fight David Price was doing the shoulder roll. I kid you not. He was completely schooling Dave Allen, and eventually Dave Allen retired on his stool and actually required oxygen, and I believe went to hospital after this fight. David Price put a beating on Dave Allen, and Dave Allen was talking a lot of shit prior to this fight. But David Price, man, really taught him a lesson, and arguably this was the sweetest victory of David Price's career. Shortly after the Dave Allen fight, Pricey then fought another big step up against Derek Chisora, and essentially in this fight, Chisora just kind of ragdolled him, mauled him around, walked through him, and eventually stopped him in the 4th round. I don't believe David Price actually went down in this fight. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but he got hurt several times in the 4th round, and the referee jumped in to stop it. But Price in this fight, he caught Chisora a couple of times with some big right hands, a right uppercut in particular that kind of buzzed Chisora. But ultimately, Derek Chisora was just too relentless and too strong for David Price, and eventually David Price got stopped. And this marked the end of David Price's career at the elite level, and, well, in boxing in general. And today, David Price has announced his retirement from the sport of boxing, man. And looking back, I mean, there's so many great moments when it comes to David Price. My favourite moments in particular, my personal favourites, obviously the Tony Thompson debacle, losing both fights, and then Frank Maloney turning into Kelly. That was a particular highlight, and the post-fight interview from Tony Thompson. Of course, you've got the Tyson Fury scenario and all that back and forth. That was pretty fun. One of the most underrated moments is the Christian Hammer fight, because David Price was winning that fight. He had Hammer down, he had Hammer hurt, but eventually, man, the gas tank just depleted and he had no more. That was a great fight. The Erkan Tepe knockout was savage, and the commentary to go with it was hilarious, I'm not going to lie. So that's another particular highlight. Obviously, the Povetkin knockout, say no more about that. The Dave Allen performance, man. I'm not a big fan of Dave Allen, so I enjoyed watching David Price go to town on Dave Allen and schooling him. That was a great highlight as well. The Cash Ali moment, man, fucking crazy. I mean, David Price's career, when you look at it, it's full of highlights. Usually bad for him, but it's full of highlights. And listen, sometimes I've kind of made this video in a bit of a comedic tone, I guess you would say, but in all seriousness, David Price, he never really achieved the heights he was expected to. However, he made a lot of money. I'm sure he owns a few properties. He's good. He's healthy. You know, he's not suffering the consequences of boxing. He speaks well, talks well, etc. So he's fine. He's fit. He's healthy, which is great. And for better or worse, David Price has had a tremendously exciting career with many great moments. Moments which I won't forget for a long, long time. So, yeah, I mean, people are going to call David Price a failure, but he made his money. He had great moments, and he's going to be remembered for a long time. Is that really a failure? I'll let you guys decide that. But in all seriousness, happy retirement to David Price. It's well earned. He took a lot of dangerous fights and he suffered the consequences at times, but I thoroughly enjoyed his career, and I wish to offer David Price a happy retirement. What about you guys? What are your personal highlights of David Price's career? What are your favourite moments? And feel free to share below. Just your David Price memories. Feel free to share below. Anyway, it's been your guy Del Boy.